You're listening to a Countout Podcast. Welcome to The Ballot. I am your host, Ryan Knightsey, and we have a great show for you today. We are heading down to the only new participant of the Wrestling Observer Ballot for next year, for 2025. And it's a trio. You know, one trio got in last year with Los Hermanos Dinamita. This year, we have another trio joining the ballot to not make up for them. They got in to even, I don't know. Anyways, we're going to be talking about Los Infernales. This is the trio that has been around since, I don't know, early 80s, let's say. I think early 80s. But this is the most famous trio, most famous group, MS1, Pirata Morgan, and El Santanico. Today, not just me discussing it, but I have 2/3 of the Club Lucha podcast. We have FOOS and Floke joining us on the show to discuss Los Infernales. FOOS, Floke, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thank you so much.
Yeah, we're very happy. We are the FXM collection, FXF, FOOS and Flokes.
Would it just be FXF, right? Wouldn't it be FXF?
Yeah, that would probably make more sense. So.
Which, yeah. Immediately great start. But yeah, I'm very happy you guys are coming on. I've been trying to get you guys on for a while to talk about this stuff, and I'm glad we finally worked out the schedules and everything to get you on. And this time around, we have a whole new group, a whole new trio here, Los Infernales. I'll start with you, FOOS. I ask this question to everybody on all the shows is, what is your sort of connection, if you have one, with Los Infernales, specifically this group here?
Yeah, for sure. So I think my connection to Los Infernales is just recognizing them kind of like as one of the great trios of Lucha Libre from an era that really, I guess, when the trios were popping off. I don't know if I can say that they're my favorite trio, but I can definitely recognize their importance, and I can recognize how good they were. So I have a lot of respect for them, and I really am always just in awe of El Santanico. I do think El Santanico is, as a solo guy, I do think he's one of the greatest just in terms of ability, longevity, name, style, entertainment. And then having that group, it almost kind of makes him, it elevates him, but it also elevates everyone in the group as well. He feels like a mentor, kind of like, like the leader. He is the leader, even at his older age now, he's still going. So to me, it's just a group that I very much respect and that I very much enjoy watching.
I'll do a quick follow-up. Do you have a favorite trios team?
Oh, favorite trios. God, that is a hard
question. Put it on the spot.
There's a really hard one. Okay. Not the pigs. No, not the modern. Classic or modern?
We'll say classic for this discussion. We all know the pigs are your modern. So what for classic?
All right, classic trios. Oh man, I gravitate very heavily to Los Villanos, despite I guess some of their very best matches and some of their most iconic stuff not being on tape. But the imagery of Los Villanos, the idea that it's 5 brothers and then like 3 of them team up and go after championships, work together, that to me is otherworldly. And even like today, the sons of the original Villanos, to me, I think the Villanos are probably my favorite trio, my favorite lucha family, faction, stable, whatever you want to call it. I think it's Los Villanos.
I think I definitely share that sentiment with you. Floke, same 2 questions. What's your connection to Los Infernales? And are they one of your favorite trios? And if not, who is?
Similar to FOOS, I can respect, the individual work of just all three guys, MS1, Pirata Morgan, El Santanico. I think all three of them have had some of the best apuestas matches of all time, and them as a group is just incredible. So just the amount of matches they've had against iconic trios, for example, the one against Los Brazos, the one their feuds. Yeah, it was like a mini feud that they had against Los Hermanos Dinamita. Just great matches, and just the amount of history that the entire group contains, because the group is still around today, just with different members. But it just shows the longevity that Santanico and that group has had for in the lucha world. So yeah, that's the connection. I can respect the work and the longevity of the group.
Yeah, I think when we talk about historical significance, I think that's one of their bigger categories in terms of strength. Is the historical significance. Number one, not number one, but one of the top billing things there are that it's a faction that still exists today, right? It started in the 80s and all the way, 40 years later, they still exist as a faction. Obviously not the same three members. It didn't even start as these three guys, right? But it's lived on through many decades, and obviously Santanico being a big reason for that. But the fact that it's lived on for so long is I think very historically significant. Favorite classical trios?
Oof, okay. Favorite classical trio. Okay. It's probably split between two answers. Villanos, just like how Fu said, the presentation that they had was just amazing, and the whole thing about three brothers, just I love it, and just the mask design, and you see so many of the classic photos that they have, and it's just like it's so iconic and just so beautiful.
The colors,
and the colors. And the other group, Los Hermanos Dinamita. I mean, just guys that are like, I love their style of wrestling. I mean, they made every single time you see a match of theirs against some technicals, especially like the younger technicals at that time, you could see how well they made them look, especially like the way that Cien Caras would sell a bunch of the moves and just like overreact to like a bunch of moves. It was just incredible, and I really appreciate the work that they put in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And obviously them going into the Hall of Fame last year, Los Hermanos Dinamita. Well, let's start off talking about their strengths and maybe some weaknesses. We'll discuss that throughout the episode. For Los Infernales, I guess we'll start off sort of saying that, this group wasn't the original group, obviously. We have Santanico MS1, but then we have Expecto Jr. In there as well. And then I think Expecto Jr. was forced to retire. I don't know what the reason was. I didn't do my research there, but he forced to retire. They had another replacement. He came in and out super quick. And then once Pirata Morgan joined them, that's when sort of things kicked off for this as a trio. And obviously, I should also say, sort of the came together as a trio, as a group, as far as I understand it. And you guys can fact check me here, but as far as I understand it, sort of a reaction to, and here's my brutal pronunciation, Los Missionarios de Muerte, sort of a reaction to their popularity in the UWA, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I can agree with that. Because like you were saying, it was kind of like a reaction. They saw CML saw the popularity that UWA were getting with their trios matches, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't. The first trios were not in UWA, but I think UWA might have been the first major company to like capitalize on them and really I guess get them going.
Yeah, I want to say that's correct. I think UWA, the first company that popularized it at the very extent. I don't know who the first trios team were. There's probably ones older.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I was looking for it today, actually preparing for this. But it wasn't. I don't remember it being anybody super notable that were in the first trios match. But I remember it was notable that it was not like for a major. It wasn't like a UWA or an EMLL who first put it on. They kind of came to them later on. But yeah, it was like, they saw UWA popping off, Los Misioneros de la Muerte, Los Cadetes del Espacio, they're big trios that were getting big over there. And then EMLL decided to start forming some of their own.
Yeah, and obviously they formed it with Expecto Jr. at first. Then it became, what is it? Beelzebub, I guess would be the English translation. Beelzebub? Bielkaba? I don't know. Would be the next second guy, but he's in there very, very short amount of time.
Yeah, very shortly.
And then in 1985, is when Pirata Morgan joins the faction, and that's when things start kicking off. And obviously, one thing that maybe hurts them in Hall of Fame case is the sort of longevity idea of it. Not a big qualifier when it comes to the Hall of Fame, but something that people bring up is that, as a faction, their first run is really like a year or two, if I'm not mistaken. I have it as like 85 to maybe 86. And then they, Pirata Morgan splits off. They have, he forms his own group. They have faction warfare there. Then eventually everyone sort of splits off segments there. And then they reform in the 90s. And that's when they sort of have their longer period, from about, I believe it's 91 to 96 roughly is when they have that longer period. So you have this sort of tough spot here of like, they only have a couple years in the 80s and then have a better amount in the 90s, but still you have all this. And I guess another part of it is like, as some voters discuss this of how much of the sort of feuding do you take a part of that? When Pirata Morgan splits off to form, what the hell was his faction? I should know this. Somebody help me out here. I should know this.
I believe it was Los Bucaneros, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Los Bucaneros.
Once he forms that faction, it's like, do you take that into consideration in terms of a feuding between these sort of three guys? But that's kind of the history of them from the beginning standpoint. That's where it gets us into the 80s. Obviously, we've probably seen some of their matches in preparation for this audio. We'll start talking about their working ability. I don't know how much of the 80s stuff versus, I know Foos, you talked about, you watched their 91 CMLL tournament finals match with Los Brazos, but how much of the 80s viewing were you guys able to catch in terms of their work rate?
No. I was gonna say from the 80s, I've not.
That's fine.
I've seen it, but there's nothing that I remember too much. It's been a while.
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to jump behind it.
I know I watched a few matches, but really, I think the only notable one that came to mind was the one that I just watched right now, which was Hermanos Dinamita versus Infernales. But it wasn't even with Pirata Morgan. It was with Masacre.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, there isn't much in terms of video, in terms of their 80s stuff. I did see a couple of it. There's some online, but nothing against like big factions that I saw. I did see one they had in UWA in 85 versus Connect, Dos Caras, and a person named Voodoo Malumba. I've never heard of this person before. Voodoo Malumba, but not a lot of stuff. Of what I saw, it was very much a very like standard heel style, I guess I'll say. A very heel style, just sort of, I guess classic beat up the heels, take some bumps, and then that's not like what I'm trying to say is like there's nothing very revolutionary about this.
I agree with you. It's very run of the mill for what it was right there in the 80s, but it worked. It worked for that time.
And then that brings us into...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add a lot of brawling, a lot of, we're in the ring, we're throwing punches.
Yes.
Kind of, I think the way they've described it is, I guess a good way I would describe it is like they were just dogs in there, they were going to beat you up until it was time for them to get theirs,
Mm-hmm. So we officially say that they have that dog in them. Is that what we're saying? Just for the just for the record,
I'm confirming they had that dog in them like crazy.
Well, that obviously gets us to the 90s. They sort of break apart. They reform the 90s for the CMLL World Trios Tournament, and that's where you sort of get a famous match between them and Los Brazos. For that,
they also had a very good match previously. Mm-hmm. It was I forgot what it was, but it was either the quarter or the semis of in that tournament that was also just really good. I forgot what it was though.
Quarter was Apollo Dantes, El Rayo de Jalisco Jr., and Justicero. And then the other one was Octagon, El Dandy, and Conan.
I think it was the quarter. I think it was the quarter. Yeah, I think it was the quarterfinals.
Yeah. I agree with that one. I like that one as well. But then you get to 90s. We can talk about that. Obviously, the CMLL World Trios Champion win. They had feuds with Los Brazos in the 80s. That's sort of where the big time. It's basically that's where they start, is they're feuding with Los Brazos for most of that time in the 80s for that year or so. Arguably maybe a Hall of Fame rivalry in the 80s, but then when they when I guess CMLL at this point, I believe they transferred the CMLL at this point. When EMLL becomes CMLL, they decide to split away from like the NWA and split away from all these other, the NWA, I should say, and they decide to do their own tournament, CMLL World Trios Tournament, no longer the Mexican National Trios titles. They bring back Los Infernales and basically do the exact same finals of the exact same tournament, basically. Los Brazos versus Los Infernales for the CMLL titles. And that's where you get sort of one of the most famous matches. Foos, you definitely talked about how you watched this match. What were your thoughts on that match? One of their most popular matches, I should say.
Oh, it's like watching, I don't know. It's like you're watching a timeless classic, really, you have a team like Los Brazos with, I will say, I mean, I've often heard that Los Brazos, especially Brazo de Plata, when he first started, he was much more trim, much more agile and stuff, and he was the best among them. But in this match too, he is a little heavier set. He's starting to get bigger. He's starting to slow down more, but the charisma still shines through a lot. And then Los Infernales in this, I feel like they're just awesome. It's like two huge personalities kind of going up against each other. And I don't know, to me, it's very, very good. It's just a very entertaining watching Los Infernales kind of be a little more brutal, kind of, holding them down. One guy holds them down, the other one beats on them. Their trios work, putting stuff together. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like a really great feeling just seeing this. It's like, I mean, you are watching history,
Yeah. I definitely agree with that in terms of their trios work. Like going from like watching them in the 80s into the 90s, not only do they get more brutal and violent in the ring, like throughout the 90s, they are popping people's head open constantly, constantly causing their opponents to bleed all over the place. But the newfound trios triple threat move set that they brought, I don't know, it was so like it was so refreshing to watch. The 80s was just like three guys who are all heels beating down individually, and then they sort of figure out as a trios team, like a proper team in the 90s, and that's where everything sort of falls together. And I think that's really where you get that great action.
There's actually a moment that I really like in the second fall. It's the end of the second fall actually, where they're all ganging up on Porky, Super Porky, Brazo de Plata, and they throw out. It's just like a simple clothesline. They go for the pin, but then the three of them, the one on the bottom, I think is MS1, and then Pirata Morgan, and on top is El Santanico.
Yes,
but they like stack each other. They stack up on each other. Yeah, yeah, and then they do a pose while they count that second fall, and it's just like, oh, this is awesome, man.
Yeah. I love that. Like the first time I saw this sort of pinning tower, this pinning Infernale tower was great. And because it's just like such a simple, it's not doing anything, right? It's just a simple, like almost like a taunt, basically, to put over them as like this sort of dominant heel group. And I just was like, we need more of that. More just dumb little, okay, we're going to stack all of our opponents up and then all sit on top of them as some sort of tower. It's such a simple thing that I really enjoyed.
What's even funnier too is after they show the pin, they flash to, because back then CML had the cartoonist working in the arena.
Yeah, what was that? I don't know anything about the cartoonist. What is this?
I don't know why they had him, but he was there for a long time. You see him in so many like 90s CMLL matches. Like they'll cut, it'll either be like after a fall or after the match. And then they'll cut to him and he's finishing up his drawing, and he'll just have this fantastic like caricature of whoever's in the ring or maybe the result. And it's just, I wish he was still around, honestly.
Yeah, I was just sort of dumbfounded by seeing, I don't know what the point of it was, just to have some guy making doodles. I liked it. I mean, it was good art, I guess, but it was just sort of like, I was sort of dumbfounded by just that guy existing in a wrestling capacity, I guess.
It makes me wonder if it was a CMLL idea or if it was a TV production idea,
Oh, maybe. I don't.
Because
Maybe.
I know in the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even a little earlier than the late 90s, CMLL did a lot of those vignettes, and there's some with those Infernales in them actually. Or I know there's one, at least a few with Santanico in them, where it's like it's almost like they're like day-to-day kind of stuff, but almost a little fantastical as well.
Yes.
Like they'll, one of my favorite ones, I talk about it all the time, is Super Porky, and I think it's Super Porky, Shocker, Mr. Niebla, and Atlantis are outside at this park by this fountain, and then los capos, los hermanos Dinamita, show up and they kick Super Porky into the fountain like crazy. They kick him right in the middle of the chest. And it's just there's one where Santanico's casting a spell on like his enemies. There's a few of them. There's one. Piece. Yeah, there's one where he's a chess piece. It's like they were able to do these little silly vignettes that were like fantastical, but maybe just still within like the realm of like wrestling possibility,
As much as someone becoming a chess piece, someone casting spells, another person, as much as that lives within but it's living within the reality of the space, living within the reality of CMLL. Like I think in my research, like I don't know, like probably 2000s, maybe the 2010s, I don't know exactly, but like when Los Infernales is still existing as a group, I think I saw that like they did like vignettes where basically to invite new members into Los Infernales, they have to go through a trial of fire or something like that. I didn't actually get to be, look out to see if I can find any of the footage, but apparently that's something that happened.
I think I know what you're talking about because I think I've seen it before where Rencor Latino and whoever Mephisto was before Mephisto, where they turn into Averno and Mephisto. This is after Ultimo Guerrero and Rey Bucanero turn on Santanico and he needs new members, right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Right. That sounds right.
But
yeah, that's all good stuff. And anyways, back to the working stuff. Hey, they're good actors too. If you want to talk about working ability, I guess they're good actors. But yeah, the working ability I think gets way stronger than 90s for sure. It was a period that I enjoyed way more when I was watching a bunch of footage of their 90s work. That's where you get a lot more of their, they got another renewed feud with Los Brazos. You have a lot of other, different trios versus various different, baby faces, Atlantis, Lizmark, who else?
Los Intocables.
Yes. They have a random match against Ultimo Dragon at one point with him in a 6-man. Vampiro comes in for CMLL right before AAA starts. And that's where you sort of get like a lot more stuff. That Vampiro one actually I thought was great. Is Lizmark, American Love Machine, and Vampiro against Los Infernales, which I thought was a pretty great match where they're just blooding up the baby faces to no end. Just complete Crimson Mask on I think almost all three, except for Lizmark. I don't think he's bloody. His mask is basically just ripped open completely. But that's a great one. Any other thoughts on their working ability? I can't really speak in terms of their promo ability. As a bona fide American boy, I can't understand anything what's happening. Yeah, that's on me. But do you have any other thoughts about sort of their working ability as a trio?
I think you spoke about it well. How whenever in the 90s, I think definitely their teamwork got way better than their little short stint in the 80s. You could clearly tell that in a lot of their matches. They had finally like come around. Especially with some of the moves that they would do. But I think just as a whole, as a group, that the wrestling ability was great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's sort of Floke? Do you think it's sort of like a top tier level? If do you think what they're doing is what am I trying to say? If you had to sort of like rate, I guess, their wrestling ability to a certain extent, I know that's a tough ask.
As a group, right? As a group,
right? Yeah, like how do they compare against other trios that you think at this time?
I think they're rating pretty highly due to that brawling style is still sort of, working for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think they were one of the trios, at least with that brawling style, that exceeded really well in it and just, made it work, just to another level. And it's you can clearly see that with, how good the crowd would react, for example, if Los Infernales did a move, like a sort of move as a group against Los Técnicos. So then when the Técnicos eventually got the upper hand, you can just tell how excited the crowd would get. And you can tell that the moves that they did as a group clearly left an impact because, it clearly left the crowd in shock whenever the Técnicos came back.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great to see them work in tandem constantly. And I mean, we talked about the triple threat action, being expanded. It's not just expanded and now they have more in their like arsenal, but it's like constant. It feels like it's a constant barrage of three guys beating up on one person, which was a great viewing experience for me.
For sure. I would agree. I was going to say, I would agree as well. Watching them like beat somebody down to the point, I feel like they were really good at like building up their own comeuppance as well.
Yes. Yes.
Like they're beating you down this entire time. They take you out of the ring. They bring your buddy in. They beat him down too, and the crowd is just getting sick of them, right? And then eventually, you get the upper hand. And the thing is, when you get the upper hand, it feels like when they're getting beat up, like they can sense the trouble that they're in, like they're genuinely afraid of their opponents, of, getting back, what they put in on those beatdowns as well.
I don't exactly remember what match it was. Like I said before recording, I watched a crap ton of footage, probably whatever was available. But there was like one match where I think they lose the second fall. It was either the first or the second fall, where like afterwards, I want to say it was like MS1 pulls like Pirata Morgan off the ring apron, and these two start like jaw jacking each other on the side, and Santanico has to break them up. Like they lose whatever fall it was, and now they're like mad at each other and really playing it up. And I was like, and obviously that sort of then ties into this was definitely in the 90s because it was probably it was during the CMLL Trios title tournament. I don't remember if it was quarter of the semis, but it was during one of the matches where, this group now has just come back together and they lose whatever the first or second fall, and they're like immediately start jaw jacking each other and sort of playing in that, like how
very nice detail.
Yeah, I thought it was a great detail, but also like how I sort of read it was like, this isn't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily, it didn't come across to me as like these guys are like necessarily a group of friends teaming up to take on the world. It almost felt like a group of like convenience of like, we're three bad guys that don't like something or whatever, and we're teaming up to try to accomplish something. And so it's like having to, and that might play into the fact that they have all these breakups. These guys have like constant hair versus hair matches against each other. Yep. So it's one of those things of like, it sort of plays into this thing of like, they will snap on each other at almost feels like on a dime. And if it's one fall that's going to break this group, then maybe you should have concerns. And maybe that sort of loose cannon crazy of they lose one fall and they're already sort of getting mad at each other, and maybe that sort of buys into the heel heat, the barrage, the beat downs, the blood that they would cause throughout the 90s. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about that sort of historical significance. I mentioned earlier how I sort of perceive that as one of their stronger categories. Not to say that the other ones are weak in anything, but I sort of see it as one of their stronger categories. We mentioned earlier that they are a faction that started in the 80s as sort of a response to UWA's Hot Trios actions. And obviously that response jumpstart the Trios division in EMLL at the time. And this sort of faction, obviously they, like we said, didn't start Trios division. They didn't exist as a group from the jump, but once they become a thing, they're the biggest. And I think that that large popularity extends to this day as a faction, as a group that exists to now, right? Obviously Santanico being a big part of it, being around for a very good portion of it as a member. But obviously, with Averno, Euphoria, Mephisto, right? This faction exists 40 years later. To me, that reads very historically significant. And then on top of that, you can add the sort of double inaugural Mexican Trios champions, both in the Mexican National Trios titles and the CMLL World Trios titles, both being the inaugural champions of both. So to me, that reads very strong in terms of historical significance. Floke, do you have any opinions on that?
Oh no, I 100% agree on, just the longevity and how you said, the historical significance of, Santanico, how it was created in the 80s and, it's still going on today. It may not be the same three people, but, Santanico's influence can clearly still be seen with, for example, Averno, Mephisto, and Euphoria. So, just the amount of titles that, the group has collected as a whole, from the start all the way to, now where the current iteration of Los Infernales are currently holding the CML World Trios titles. Like, you can clearly tell they were big. They still are.
And if they weren't big, would this faction still exist, right? That's the obvious question. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to sort of think about that as like, it might also be a tough thing to say completely. If I had to be a devil's advocate, maybe it's a tough thing to say of like, there are also a lot of, these other factions we've mentioned, or a lot of, factions of brothers, the Villanos, the Hermanos Dinamita, obviously, the Brazos. These are all factions of brothers. So like when it expands down the line, you can't really, have these brothers generationally still existing per se, at least not all the time. I guess to Villanos to a certain extent. But having
Dinamitas,
but for Infernales, this can exist as a faction, as a group, with or without, and obviously it started that way as well. Foos, what do you think? What do you think about? Do you think this Los Infernales group, this specifically, do you see them as historically significant?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is regarded as the strongest version of the group by a lot of people. The Santanico, MS1, Pirata Morgan. And I think that builds them up a lot, especially because if you go down like through the Infernales kind of history, like the breakups and then the reformations with these new members, if you see who like else has been a part of this group, who like kind of came up through the group but then went out on their own, it almost felt like, especially with like Último Guerrero and Rey Bucanero, because they were the team basically of the 2000s. Like they were the tag team of the 2000s, and they started off the 2000s, the late 90s in Los Infernales before, trying to take over Los Infernales, take the name from El Santanico, and then really just causing Máscara Mágica to lose his mask. But like, to me, not every iteration of the group has been, like marquee. There's I was looking and I was like, some of these names, I can't say I know a lot about Nosferatu, but like, I can't say he was like, the headliner that an Último Guerrero, a Pirata Morgan was, but like, even like in the modern day too, Hechicero's not with the group anymore, but I mean, that was until last year, right? Like, until 2023.
Yeah, it was like it was like mid or late 2023 when they kicked him out.
Mm-hmm. And then like Floke was saying too, they're the world trios champs right now, and they took that off. I think it was Máscara Dorada 2.0,
Neon and Star Junior,
and then I almost said Max's Star, but he's the national champ right now. But I think definitely the name carries a lot of weight, and I think the name carries a lot of weight because of that original group. They were so significant, they were so iconic. And it also does kind of make me sad for Espectro Jr. because, like, a lot of people, like we recognize it because we did the research on him, but like most people be like, oh yeah, Los Infernales, that was MS1, Pirata Morgan, Santanico, but it was Espectro Jr. first, and he had to stop wrestling due to, I think it was injuries. I think he had just a lot of injuries that he couldn't keep going. But I mean, there's a reason they remember these three guys instead of poor Spectro Jr.
Yeah, you feel bad for the guy because it is, if he was able to stick around, who knows what the faction would have maybe become. Could have been bigger, could have been not as obviously less significant, Would they have been, would they have beaten Los Brazos for the Mexican national trials?
But if they've been as iconic,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like, would they have been as iconic without Pirata Morgan joining the group?
Yep.
So I think he joined the group. He was already full on eye patch, I believe, at that point in the 80s, if I recall correctly.
Yes, I believe so.
I was gonna say too, just the way the group is positioned. I guess that's a better way to summarize what I was saying. Like, the group is not positioned as like a opening card. They're never opening the card. They're never on match 2. They're the World Trios champs. They get big matches, and they get big matches against pretty big names as well. And they get big people in the group. Like upper card guys in the group. It's not like a opening card act in the modern day, and I think that is because the name carries much more weight now.
Yeah, and it sort of brings us to their drawing ability, right? Is why were they so popular, right? Where were they on the cards? They're not necessarily in the main event all the time. They definitely pop up here and there as main eventers, but they're very solidly like semi-main eventers, helping build the house as well. Arguably Hall of Fame rivalry with Los Brazos, both in the 80s and 90s, where you're having these long periods of stretches in the feud of just sellout arenas. And I would say even like, popping over to AAA in 93, obviously a very big time for, very big, massive attendance wise for AAA in 93 for various reasons, of course. But, they're popping in. I have they're on the semi-main event against Los Hermanos Dinamita for 20,000 attendance in 93. Granted, the main event is Blue Panther versus Love Machine. But, who's in the same main event? It's Los Infernales versus Los Hermanos Dinamita. And also, like, a lot of these feuds and drawing, power stuff that they have are against, like, other Hall of Fame tag teams. Los Hermanos Dinamita, Los Brazos, people that have already gotten in and already certified as, to a certain extent, draws. So, whereas I can't necessarily find hard and fast data for, again, obvious reasons when it comes to Lucha Libre wrestling, as far as I can tell, long stretches where they are a part of a lot of these arena sellouts. So they definitely, not just successful in terms of their probably wrestling ability, but obviously successful in terms of their popularity, as far as I can tell.
I can agree with that. Absolutely. And to the point you said, like finding that hard data for these, some of these is a bit tough. The larger events, they'll have like the attendance and all that, but it is kind of hard to gauge what their impact specifically on selling tickets was.
Yeah.
For that, I guess I just kind of look at it. I hate to say it like this, but it's more like a vibes thing. Like
100%.
What does it sound like when they're out there? Is the arena packed, and are they getting the reactions, and where are they on the card? Kind of like the combination of those three things kind of paints a clearer picture, where I guess we don't have all the data to paint like the factual. I guess we can go on vibes for that one.
Yes. As long as CMLL isn't like pumping in a bunch of fake audio, crowd noise, I think we'll be in the clear for the very least. But yeah, I totally agree. It's vibes. It's, do I see any sort of empty seats? You see a couple, I guess, here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty much that, or at the very least, are they getting the crowd reaction? I think that's also that plays into the working ability. But if they're able to get a crowd reaction, that would imply a drawing ability. Floke, do you have any thoughts on them as sort of a Hall of Fame level draw?
I mean, no, I kind of agree with you guys. You kind of have to go off a vibe thing. It's especially like. Yeah, it's tough, especially with those times. Like, you're not sure. Like, there's some very clear, obvious draws from that time. Like, obviously, like Rayo de Jalisco Jr., Cien Caras, other wrestlers like that. But like as a group, that's kind of where it's more difficult to see it as, because it's not just one person. It's three people that you have to see. Oh, are they drawing? Are they getting attention? Are they getting boos, cheers from the crowd? It's very much a vibe thing. It very much is.
Plus, it's the sort of how much do you break down in terms of drawing, I guess. are we allowed to just look at them only as sort of a draw in terms of trios, or are we looking at, let's say El Santanico has some sort of hair versus hair match versus somebody during this period? Does that attribute to something? And obviously, I would have to imagine that's the main event. Does that attribute to sort of them as a case as a whole? That's sort of the tough gray area, I guess, of the sort of Hall of Fame discussions. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I don't believe either of you guys are voters, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to put you on blast.
I don't think so.
I don't want you guys on blast. Do you guys have any thoughts on that sort of talking point, that gray area? Do you sort of feel like, in your opinion, do you feel like you should look strictly at the letter of the law, look at them as a trios, as a three group, or do you think it should be sort of open up to their singles ability, their rivalries between each other, and I guess even in some cases their tag team?
I think it should be opened up.
And to what extent, Flo?
Maybe to just what rivalries every individual member was having at that time, because Los Infernales isn't just one person; it's all three guys. So if they have, for example, an apuestas feud around that a certain time, they might have more drawing power, and that gives more attention and more publicity to Los Infernales, to the name of Los Infernales, and it might bring more attention and more drawing power to them. So I think, since it's not just made up of one person, it would be fair to say that we should look at all three individuals and see what they were doing around that time, or who they were facing, or who they were feuding with.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Foos, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I can see the one thing that's bothering me, I guess, is like about their drawing and stuff, is I don't think they ever had a trios apuestas with Los Infernales in it, and there were other trios who did that, like I think the most famous one, Los Brazos and Los Villanos, right? And that was a rivalry so legendary that they did the 3-on-3 trios, and they there was a decisive winner from that. I guess Los Infernales never really had that, but I guess that's the big negative point that I'm thinking of in terms of like what do they do as a trio together? Because individually, like Pirata Morgan and Santanico, MS1, like they all had individual great luchas apuestas, but like as a trio, they never had. I don't think they ever had that opportunity. Maybe they didn't want it. I don't know.
That maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say so far as much as they didn't want it, because it feels like they're constantly having hair versus hair matches. These guys every 6 months they need to get a haircut or something like that. See, I think that's a fair point. I didn't think about that, but that is a fair point of why not have a sort of trios match, and maybe that's to a certain extent of who the other team would be. Why not have that sort of lucha de puestas match, right?
It's possible. I feel like it is also possible. Maybe they just could never get the timing right with a babyface like trios team to do that apuestas with. Maybe they just, I mean, like they had their matches like we were talking about against Los Brazos, the Los Intocables, Los Dinamita. But at that time, could any of them afford to lose their hair against Los Infernales as well? I guess so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Point.
And also at the same time, these guys tend to be fighting over titles, right? And, titles obviously meaning less than, hair or mass in these matches, but, they are sort of established as like title holders, inaugural champions, want to get back what was once ours, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So maybe there is an argument where their focus creatively in a booking sense is more about titles versus, revenge, hair, I guess,
hair or mass.
Yeah. I mean, because also they didn't really have large feuds with mask wrestlers, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to think.
I mean, they're when they went against Los Intocables, they were beating the hell out of Pierrot. They were ripping his mask up crazy.
That's true.
But I don't think I can't think of like three guys who were all masked against them. I mean, Los Dinamita, Cien Caras, had he already lost his?
No, by the time that they started feuding, it was around like where they had like that run of matches in AAA. It was like 93, and It was
Yeah.
both Chucho and Carmelo had already both lost their masks. Yeah.
Yeah, that was July to about like September or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Two of them
All of their
lost their
matches were against just Dinamita.
dude. But it was a great run of matches.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When I said like this is the '90s, they're constantly blooding each other up, ripping up masks. One mask, I guess. Great action. It's just great action, I think. So yeah, I guess that's a good point. Maybe they aren't necessarily Hall of Fame level draws per se, but I think they're definitely strong cases in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, like I said, I think historical significance is probably the strongest. Is it a Hall of Fame level? Probably, I would think. And then wrestling ability and a drawing ability, it might not be necessarily a Hall of Fame level. I don't think they were revolutionary in the ring, per se. They're probably not necessarily a top tier trios, but they are definitely, I think, very strong, at the very least, very strong in what they do as heels. So I guess before we go out here, do you guys sort of see these guys as a Hall of Famers? If you had a ballot, would you consider you would vote for them? Obviously, I'll throw you guys the entire mix.
Yeah, we'll have to see the other names, I think, first.
That's fair. That's fair. But any big thoughts and sort of how, any last big thoughts, I guess, about Los Infernales? Floke, I guess we'll start with you.
I mean, like you were saying, they might have not been, the top, the top card level draws, and maybe their wrestling ability wasn't the greatest, but the style that they did, they exceeded very well at it. And you can tell by just how many of their, just how many reactions, their matches against Los Dinamita, Los Brazos, Los Intocables, how much the crowd was just excited. And, you could tell that the crowd was amped and just ready to see what the hell they were going to do next. And they were always excited to see, Los Infernales beating up the Técnicos and then the Técnicos eventually coming back. It's a formula that works very well. And, Los Infernales just over-exceeded, I would say, in that field. And even though if we're counting it just as a general whole, they might not be the best, like, in general, I still think the fact that they were able to, I wouldn't say exactly perfect it, but, work it out so well in their own style, I think it's just something that we should give them credit for, and that should also be considered when, talking about their case for being Hall of Famers.
Foos?
I one of the things I guess that I wanted to bring up about just trios in general is how this match type, especially for this era, was the most popular type of match. People, I guess Mexican audiences love a trios match, and I do too personally. But I think that because they were so important to the most, I guess, popular match type, I think that counts a lot for them as well. Being the first national trios champs, being the first CMLL World Trios champs, I think to me that would definitely earn them a spot, I guess, in the Hall of Fame, combined with the way they worked. This brutal, they got the dog in them. They're brutalizing their opponents. They're using the 3-man advantage so well, and they're building up that comeuppance against them so well when they're going up against Técnicos, and even like Rudo versus Rudo. Like, I still think that they are very very good at eating their just desserts when the time comes as well. Well, they didn't, I guess, win any huge apuestas as a trio or anything like that. We're still trying to figure out the draw. Were they moving tickets like that? We can't be certain that it was them doing it, but I think that I would definitely. Yeah, I haven't seen the rest of the names on the card, but right now I think we've talked them up so much. I feel like I would definitely vote for them. And I think even if you just we're just okay, yeah. Do you think Los Infernales are they Hall of Fame worthy? I would say, yeah, probably. I think they're important enough that I would give it to them. But maybe after we listen to the rest of these days, maybe I would be like, oh, well, maybe, maybe not.
All right. Well, I put them in the private chat. I spaced them out, and then they just deleted the spacing. Anyways, in Mexico region next year, obviously there are 10 acts right now. Obviously, Dave has a tendency to add someone last minute, especially if someone passes away or something like that. So as of right now, there are 10 acts, which means you would have 3 votes. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this list, guys. You only have 3 groups, 3 people you can vote in.
Okay.
Darrell Dixon, Gran Hamada, Sangre Chicana, Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner, El Hijo del Santo and Octagon, Volador Jr., Mascarita Sangrada, La Parca from AAA, El Dandy, and obviously Los Infernales. Possibly a tough list. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this.
That is a tough
There's some people
list.
I definitely like in here. Floke, do you have any immediate reactions to this?
Yes, I do actually. God, but you said only 3 votes, right? You said only
Yeah.
3 votes.
Only 3.
Oof, it would probably be El Dandy, Los Infernales, and I'd have to go with either Volador Jr. or Mascarita Sagrada. Yeah, I think might be more of a personal bias, but I think both guys. I think both Mascarita Sagrada and Volador Jr. are both very crucial, and I feel like their importance in the lucha scene as a whole has been very overlooked. Yeah, I would say it's been very overlooked.
I definitely agree that in terms of Mascarita Sangrada. Like the only mini in the history of wrestling, not just in Mexico, but in the world, to be on the ballot for the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame.
Wow.
That it feels like, and obviously, sort of mini wrestling has sort of died away in terms of America. But let's get the most famous guy. Let's get some representation, I guess. Let's get the most famous guy in here. What's pulling you to those, I guess, technically 4 names?
I would say for Mascarita Sagrada, just the whole minis thing. I feel like just the influence that he had in, that scene and that, that division as a whole for both, CML and AAA. I feel like it's very crucial. And some of the best matches I feel like of that time honestly come from that division. And, I feel like people don't put enough focus on that. If we're talking about the drawing factor, maybe it wasn't the highest, but man, I feel like the fact that he was just able to, step up and, for younger mini wrestlers, that were probably coming up at the time, being able to be like an influence, an inspiration, I feel like something that maybe should be taken into consideration.
Are there any other mini wrestlers that like sort of outkick their coverage, like bigger, that feel bigger or more famous or more popular than the how do I say this? Than their original wrestler, like Mascara. I'm not trying to say.
Well, are we talking strictly whenever they were under the minis name, or are we talking also just like their entire career as a whole?
I guess as the entire career as a whole. I'm saying like in terms of Mascara Sangrada versus Mascara Sangrada.
I think maybe
outkick coverage,
because Beatles was technically a mini at first.
Well, yeah, that's true.
And he has outgrown the character that he was originally portraying as a mini. So
that's true. Held that title hostage for a very long time, and then all of a sudden was like, oh, I'm no longer mini.
Yeah, very great matches though. Great matches.
Foos, question here. You got 10 acts, 3 votes. Who are you sort of vying towards?
This is an unbelievably hard list to pick from. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
hey, I was about to give an honorable mention to El Dandy, so I'm just waiting to put in that.
That's fair.
Yeah. If I get, to me, all 10 of these, well, like 9 of these, maybe 8 of these. 8 of these I would put in, I think. But if I get 3, I think Darrell Dixon is really. He's really important for a lot of reasons, but I can't accurately make on his in-ring work. I can't really make a lot of claims on that because that is way, way before my time. But in terms of like historically, I do think he's really important. Mm-hmm. I actually was watching an interview with him the other day, and he's a very interesting guy. Gran Hamada, I feel like I feel like he would get my first vote. Everything I've seen from him is incredible. I think he was a really big influence, and I think he's a very unique type of luchador.
And obviously the Puro connection with him.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, yeah. really good bridge between the styles with Gran Hamada. Sangre Chicana, again, this is a guy who I think a lot of his. I was watching an interview with Santanico actually.
You
Prepping for this,
were
and
watching the Latin Lover podcast interview.
was he on? Has he been on Latin Love
I
Broadcast?
think isn't that the one where we was talking about how Octagon threw someone in a pool or something like that?
Oh no, I was talking about Santanico. I was talking about Santanico.
Oh, okay.
Because Santanico was talking about Sangre Chicana.
Oh,
And yeah. He was mentioning how Chicana was like not like he was not going to put you in llaves. He was not going to be like the super worker. He was going to go out there and he was going to beat the hell out of you, and like he's going to put his fists to your body. And it feels like every match that I've seen of Sangre Chicana is that, but it works every time. Like his punches are so good. Like the way he takes the punches are so good. Everything.
Also,
so
famous match against MS1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that is true.
God.
One of the most famous.
A connection was made.
Yeah. And he had another he had a great one against El Santanico too. Sangre Chicana.
Yes.
He had great ones against El Perro Aguayo. He had one later in his career that was pretty good that I liked against Heavy Metal. He had a 3-way Bull Terrier match with Perro Aguayo and El Cobarde, I think, in AAA, maybe mid 90s AAA, late 90s AAA, where I think Sangre Chicana was the first one out. And then Perro Aguayo ended up beating El Cobarde for his hair. But I think El Cobarde was mostly bald by that point as well. So, but I think Sangre Chicana would be my second one. And like names like Angel Blanco and El Dr. Wagner, like that's La Ola Blanca. Like, that's again a legendary name, but it's just so before before my time.
Judge.
Yeah. Hijo del Santo en Octagon. Yeah, they have one of my favorite apuestas ever. But I'm not sure that one match like is enough to get them in as like together.
Sure.
Volador Jr.
I think that sort of befallen to a couple of years ago, Dave just like taking a bunch of already Hall of Famers and just be like, what's the most famous tag team of the two? And then be like, let's throw them on the ballot.
Volador Jr.
Come on,
He's my guy.
I feel a massive butt coming.
He was my wrestler of the year for 2023. I think he was the best guy in 2023. I don't know if I can put him in over Mascarita Sagrada or El Dandy, though.
Wow.
I can. I like La Parca AAA, but I can comfortably put almost every one of these names in front of La Parca AAA in terms of just because his work, Yeah. And then he was like the. I don't know how to describe his role in AAA because it wasn't like a great worker, but he could definitely get the crowd on his side, and he was pretty funny. But
yeah. Well, plus you have the sort of difficulty of is it him or the mask?
Mm-hmm.
Hurricane Ramirez had a little bit of that, I guess, on the ballot last, I guess the past 15 years, where it's the sort of thing of like, is the gimmick over? Is it the guy? That sort of difficulty, I guess, when it comes to specifically Mexican wrestling. I
love Mascarita Sagrada, and
another bud coming. It feels.
I personally love Mascarita Sagrada 2000 better. The one who would end up becoming Mascarita Dorada, the one who would end up being El Torito in WWE.
Yeah.
I thought he was not by a lot, but I thought he was better than Mascarita, the first Mascarita Sagrada. And that might be a really, really hot take. But personally, I love Mascarita Dorada. I think he's unbelievable. So I can't comfortably put Mascarita Sagrada in over him.
There wouldn't have been a second one without the first.
Yeah. See, that's where I feel like I I start contradicting myself, and I start second guessing myself on these things. But
yeah, I'm putting you
my
guys in a
third
tough
one-
spot. Putting you in a tough spot. You're not doing the research. You're not. These are snap decisions. You just happen to go after all of Floke's faves. That's fine.
Yeah. We're used to it at this point. I mean, look, Floke goes after my goat all the time. One of my top faves all the time. So you know, a little just desserts.
Come on now, we both know that Volador is better than Místico.
Well, you know, but is he better than El Dandy, bro? I think I'm going with El Dandy.
Honestly, I might switch my
pick.
pick from Mascarita Sagrada to El Dandy.
I think El Dandy being at 18% only, I think that is a little low for him. And I think in the future, if you would have us, we could definitely come back on and talk some more about El Dandy because
I tried to have you guys on a couple months ago to talk about
That's true.
Yeah. It never worked out, unfortunately. Yeah, I got really busy, but
that's fine.
We're gonna plan out for El Dandy because I ride for El Dandy. I think he's awesome. I think it is a shame that most, you know, people who are not, I guess, looking for his stuff or like, you know, in the know or, you know, really diving deeper past WCW.
Yeah.
Kind of just see him as like the Bret Hart. Oh, who are you to doubt a Dandy? Which
it's
I'm glad Bret Hart recognized Dandy was good, but like, you know, God,
I would coward for not actually making that match happen.
Yeah. It would have been like if people had seen the peak of El Dandy, like what he could do in WCW. Oh man.
Well, how about this? We couldn't make it work last time, and now he's no longer a new person on the ballot. How about you guys come here, I come on to Club Lucha, we talk El Dandy, go full breath about El Dandy.
We'll have to do an El Dandy episode. We'll have to do an El Dandy episode.
A real deep dive into El Dandy. I agree. I get like 18%. This is his first time on the ballot last year, first time coming on.
Oh, okay, then that makes sense.
There's a lot of like, you had Los Hermanos Dinamita obviously going in. You can see how all the rest of the voting shaped out. So I'm glad he didn't drop off immediately, right? Like Psycho Clown came on again and he dropped off immediately. I think that was the only guy in Mexico that dropped off.
Oh man.
I think Psycho Clown has been on 3 times now.
Wow.
That's Soups would be mad for that one.
No,
that's his goal for real.
He fell off twice. He popped on in 2021 and fell off immediately, and then he popped on in 2024 and fell off immediately. I don't necessarily know what changed for him between 2021 and 2024. Especially 2024, but sure, Dave. Sure, let's put him back on.
Maybe it's just a very big fan of 2024 AAA. Who knows?
I was gonna say, the AAA just didn't give him anything to do this year.
Yeah, I was sort of shocked that he got put back on. I was like, all right, I guess. So to be clear, of the 10X, you get 3 votes. You're voting for 8.
Oh no, I was saying I feel like I could make an argument for 8, but if I'm doing 3, I'm going with Gran Hamada, Sangre Chicana, and El Dandy.
That's fine. That's good. Well, neither of you guys want to vote for Los Infernales. That's fine. But we'll trudge on forward. No, I think it's fine. I think they might, if you want to talk about the political ramifications of the voting body and all these sort of things, I think that they will probably stay on, but I think there will be a lot more people that want to push their votes towards people like Gran Hamada, people like Dorel Dixon, people closer to the top to try to put them over the top. Now that the Dinamita votes are available, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. I think Infernale should get some. I don't expect them to fall off immediately. I think they have a lot more, and I think we did a good job expressing what their case is. I think there's definitely people that they are above on this list. But I don't expect them to fall off at all. I think it's just sort of how the voting body breaks out, especially with all these other guys at the top of the pack here and whether or not they get in.
I was going to say, if I got a 4th vote, I think I would go with Los Infernales, but I agree. I don't think they should fall off. I think at some point they should get on, but I think that there are, like you said, a few people ahead of them in my eyes, I guess.
Yeah, you said this is their entry year, right?
Yes, this is the entry year.
Okay,
Santanico obviously has already gone in as a
Mhm.
singles. MS1 has never been on the ballot individually, and then Pirata Morgan has gone on before but fell off in 2023.
Mm.
A tough thing for Pirata Morgan, but hopefully maybe this is the way he gets in
Hopefully.
versus Los Infernales. And again, it's one of those things of we'll see how it shakes out for them. I think they have a solid enough case. Do they have the strongest? Are they slam dunks? I think we can all sort of agree that they're not necessarily a slam dunk, especially since of the 3 votes you guys didn't put them towards them.
Yeah.
Not slam dunk Hall of Famers, but I think what they might end up being, in a lot of ways, like Los Hermanos Dinamita ended up being, they're going to be growers, probably. People that, as people maybe do more research, more discovery, maybe we can find more attendance figures.
How long did it take for Los Hermanos Dinamita to get on?
That's a good question. Let's see.
Because I feel like Cien Caras alone has like a really solid case.
Sin Caras was a very, I guess, famous case for Dave because he never got in as an individual,
wow.
if I'm not mistaken, which upset Dave greatly. Because Dave felt very strongly that Sin Caras should have gotten in. Sin Caras came onto the ballot in 1998, fell off in 2001, came back on in 2010, and then fell off in 2018.
Wow.
And so then Dave put them in a trios, obviously with Los Hermanos Dinamita. And should I command F this? Nope, I'm already scrolling. They went on as a group in 2021, and then obviously they got into the Hall of Fame in 2024 with 61.3% of the vote.
That is wild that he had to be put with his brothers just to get in. That's shocking to me.
Yeah. It's one of those things, right? It's some people sort of won a smaller Hall of Fame. Some people won a larger Hall of Fame, and Sin Cara was on that line, I guess. And I guess that's the tough part. And, we talk about some of the negatives. I think that's one of the tough things about Los Infernales is I think Aramatos Dinamita were around in terms of consistency for way longer than them, right? And, I think there are going to be some voters that look at sort of the inconsistent sort of stop and start runs for these guys, and they're going to look at that and be like, I don't know about, if they were together from 84 to 96, then maybe, but they have stops and starts here and there. So I think that's something that's just going to hurt them, but is what it is, I guess, when it comes to voters.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it from us here on the ballot. Again, FOOS, Floke, I very much appreciate both you guys coming on. I guess now would be I'm going to set the table for you guys. What plugs do you guys have for the listening audience? FOOS, I guess we'll start with you.
Plugs. If you guys like me and Floke's contributions today, check us out. We are on the Club Lucha podcast. I also do, some videos on YouTube just talking about, general matches, licharies. Yeah, just lucha in general. I wish I could be a little more consistent, a little more uploads on that, but, life is very busy. We get to what we can, and we appreciate, I guess, being on today. We really do. We love the conversation, and hopefully, we can do another one.
Yeah.
You also do a lot of clip videos, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And
the edits, yes.
The edits. I assume you'll have a Nosferatu edit at some point.
At this point, I'm gonna trudge through and try and find enough footage. And if I can find a Nosferatu edit, it'll coincide with the movie coming out. The new.
Oh, there we go. That works out. That'll work out quite well, I guess. So you don't have a lot of time, but that works out quite well. What is that, like next month? No, not even next month. That's like Christmas or something, right?
Yeah, I think it's about to come out like within a week.
Wow, clock's ticking. All right. Look, any plugs for you?
I guess if you want to see my general thoughts that I usually share about certain lucha topics or just the modern lucha day scene, you can see me discussing them mainly on my Twitter, which is the @FH isn't real. I talk a lot about the indie. I do talk about a good amount about the indie scene in La Comarca Lagunera, which is in Torreon, Coahuila. Certain parts of that area in Mexico, and I try to push out a lot for younger wrestlers, for example, Sherwas, Sonic, just trying to get more eyes on these young up and comers that, follow their development. So whenever, hopefully they get big, you can go back and see their work and be like, just see the overall amount of growth, they've had. So yeah, you can follow me over there. And I also write for the 5-Star Network. So I plan on writing a piece on Sherwas soon. So you can wait for that. Hopefully like next 2 or 3 weeks it'll be dropping, hopefully. So yeah. Thank you for having us.
I think definitely your work talking about Shewa has definitely helped put me on him as a guy to watch.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. Well, again, FOOS, Floke, thank you guys so much for coming on to the ballot. And for everyone else listening to this podcast, we'll check you all next month for all new discussion on an all new, brand new ballot tier. Not a word. Anyways, that's it for me. I'll talk to you all later. Bye. This has been a Count Out Podcast.
Hey, have you guys heard of the new show on the Count Out Network, the Ichiban Sweetcast?
It's the brand new New Japan Pro Wrestling podcast starring the International Wrestling Grand Prix. That's me, your good friend Curtis Spears.
And me, your bad friend Rafe Hewson. And we're here to talk about everything New Japan Pro Wrestling, reacting to everything, getting worked up, getting very happy, sometimes crying. Kind of like something else we used to do, right?
Oh, yeah. That was the old Okada Shorts podcast, right?
Ah, that's right. And if you love that show, you're going to love this show because it's exactly the same show.
Yeah, we just had to change the name.
Yeah, we did. But you can check it everywhere on a social media handle that we haven't made yet.
Yeah, we're really new to this. So what you can do is search on your favorite podcast catcher of choice. Look for the Ichiban Sweetcast.
Sweetcast, Ichiban.